Hello, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're well. I come to you the day after the night before with, quite frankly, more questions than answers once again. And before we get on to the football match that was played last night, I do feel once again I have to speak on the future of our manager, PP Paolo Pezzolano. And firstly, I would disagree with recent comments from some Watford fans on social media that we as supporters have maybe become too accustomed to Gino's way of thinking. If anything, I would say most Watford fans are actually the opposite and would much rather we have stability and a long-term project at the club. However, I think for me, looking at most importantly his communication and man management skills, I do feel we are wasting maybe a very talented squad and one of the better teams actually we've had for quite a long time. Certainly, I would argue the best squad we've probably had since our last relegation from the Premier League. So I think for me it is important Watford either commit to Paolo solely or very quickly, if they feel it's going the wrong way, make that change. Because for me, when everyone's fit, which they pretty much are as it stands by Georgie Shakpatatse, this is quite easily a top six squad. I firmly believe in my heart, when everyone is 100% fully fit, ready to go, this Watford team can compete with pretty much every squad in this division. I have no doubts about that, and they've certainly shown their quality in glimpses this season. I just don't like Paolo Pezzolano. It's as simple as that. I just don't like the vibe he gives off. Now, I'm happy if you guys disagree. Do let me know in the comments down below. That's what freedom of speech is all about. We're all entitled to our own opinions. But I just get, in my mind, I just get comparisons between Paolo Pezzolano and Vladimir Ivic. And when Watford made that change to, I have to say, again, another relatively unknown manager in Xisco Munoz, the squad suddenly lifted, the morale was better. And I just don't think everyone is quite on board with Paolo. I'm certainly not. I know a lot of you are not on board with Paolo. And from what I'm hearing behind the scenes, and actually even the body language of some of the players, it doesn't really look like they're behind Paolo Pezzolano either. I would argue actually the second half against Hull City and the second half yesterday was actually more the players fighting for the shirt and showing their willingness to play for the club rather than playing for the manager and backing him. So yeah, I feel quite conflicted in a way because I want Watford to win every match they play. I want to make that very clear regardless of who the manager is. But again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I do feel at the moment we are wasting such an exciting squad with a manager who, quite frankly, for me, is out of his depth. So we'll see what happens this weekend. I don't think Watford will do anything before Oxford. I think if a decision is to be made, it will happen over the weekend and at the start of the international break. But let's talk about the big talking point that come away from the game yesterday, and that was really the substitution of Iran-Kunda on the 30th minute mark. Now, I've seen a few Watford fans and actually quite a lot of Portsmouth fans suggest his body language wasn't quite right. Apparently, he wasn't tracking back in certain situations, and the Watford bench were getting quite animated at him. But I think for me, from a man management perspective, you have to remember, this isn't any old player. Iran-Kunda is our marquee signing. He is arguably our biggest prized asset. He's our most valuable player. He signed from Bayern Munich this summer, and to take him off like we did, and then subsequently see the reaction Iran-Kunda had, that suggests to me, again, something isn't quite right. That's massive red flags, flashing in my face there. And yesterday, I was quite rightly furious at half-time. I really went in to Paolo Pezzolano on our live match watch-along we did. And playing devil's advocate, you could argue Paolo's decision actually paid off. Rocco Vata come onto the pitch and straight away within 30 seconds of the second half, he made a real impact on the game. He assisted the first goal, he scored the second goal. So from that perspective, you could argue the change worked. But again, from a man management perspective, if Iran-Kunda was brought off at half time, I think a lot of Watford fans would have been a lot calmer. But to see him come off like he did, Yeah, I don't agree with that. I really don't. So yeah, that's an interesting discussion point. Hopefully it is okay behind the scenes, but from what I've heard from a few people close to the situation, and again, just the general body language of some players and how they're interacting with Paolo, it suggests to me that there is, something deeper potentially going on at Watford. In terms of the actual football match at hand and how we played, the first half, similar to Hull, I wasn't too impressed. I thought we had, a few half chances going forward, a couple of shots from the edge of the box. Iran-Kunda had one just before he was taken off. Imran Loser did. Valdo Semedo had a ball poked past the goalkeeper. That was cleared off the line as well. So we certainly had opportunities in the first half. It wasn't as poor as maybe the Millwall game, for example. But yeah, it wasn't a glowing reflection on how I would want this Watford team to play. The second half, again, as I mentioned, certainly was an improvement. I really want to talk about the first goal, actually, because I felt Watford's best football yesterday was played on the transition and on the counter, really. When Watford had the opportunity to win back possession and counter quickly, with pace, that is when we looked at our most threatening. And Semedo won the ball back. He played a really quick, incisive pass actually into space to find Rocco Vata, who took a touch, turned and ran into space down that left-hand side very quickly. The cutback for Loser was a tap-in really in the end. And yeah, that was a really exciting move. And I want to see more of that, really. I want to see our best attackers on the pitch. I want to see Bar, Vata, Iran-Kunda, Kiramgard, all playing together in one team. Whilst the back five is fine for certain situations, I just think long term the obvious formation is a 4-3-3 or actually a 4-2-3-1. Get the wide players on running at the fullbacks and let's create some exciting opportunities. We've got Bar, Iran-Kunda, Vata, Othman Mamar when he returns, Georgie when fit, Kiermgaard, Semedo, Doumbia. We've got some real exciting players, and I just feel this formation is limiting us somewhat in attacking areas. So yeah, it's an interesting discussion point, and I do feel if we had a more experienced man in the dugout, we'd be sitting far higher in the table than we are currently. The second goal, again, was very well worked. Musa Sissoko, look, he had a very poor game yesterday. I looked at his statistics on social media. I think throughout the entire time he was on the pitch, he completed 8 passes, or he had 8 pass attempts and like 7 completed. It was extremely poor. He won very few duels in the match as well. So another poor game by Musa Sissoko, but he did contribute to the second Watford goal. A bit like Rocco Vata, he found himself in some space down the opposite side this time, down the right flank. It was like a cross-come shot from Musa. I wasn't quite sure what he was trying to do, but it took a deflection and fell into the path of Rocco Vata, who nodded home in the right place at the right time. And I'm really delighted for Rocco Vata, actually, because he looks very frustrated, actually. I watched his post-match interview yesterday with one of the Watford media staff, and he said, look, I'm here, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to kick on. And like many of our attackers this season, I do feel he has been underutilised in many games, and on occasion he's not even made it onto the pitch at all. So Rocco Vata for me was a big highlight from yesterday. Imran Loser once again carried the midfield. I thought Hector Kyprianou had maybe his poorest Watford performance so far. I think it's fair to say, but even our best players are allowed an off day, so I'm not too concerned about that for now. Max Alleyne in defence looked as steady as he usually does. He looks like a real asset. Actually, he wins so many ground and aerial duels. When you look at him physically, he looks like quite a weak player, I think it's fair to say. But actually, his underlying statistics are some of the best in the division. So really impressed with Max Alleyne once again. I think the last talking point we have to address is Egil Selvik. Now, I'm not a goalkeeping expert, so I'm not going to break down the goals he conceded. However, there does seem to be a growing consensus across social media suggesting that Selvik is maybe having quite a poor run of form at the moment. That even started actually before his concussion against Millwall. It's fair to say the goals he's conceding lately are pretty soft. The second goal, for example, was at his near post. It was a very powerful strike, don't get me wrong, but I think 9 times out of 10, you'd expect your goalkeeper to get down and save that. So, yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. I saw some people suggesting Nathan Baxter should have kept his shirt after his performance against Hull, but Paolo Pezzolano made it very clear that Selvik, is the number one at the club and he will retain his place when fit. So not too concerned about Selvik, but if his form continues like it has done, I do think more questions will be asked of that goalkeeper position. And look, we want every position to be competitive. Nathan Baxter does seem like a really great backup option, and if he's going to challenge Eggle for that position, I'm all for it, because the more players you have pushing for starting places, ultimately the better your squad will be, because everyone will want to perform at a higher standard. So yeah, keep an eye on Selvik. Hopefully he's all good, but yeah, certainly not a good run of form of late, it has to be said, for the Norwegian goalkeeper. All right, we'll leave it there. Oxford United up next. This could be ultimately the final game we see Paolo Pezzolano in the Watford dugout. Let's see what happens. But for me, it's clearly a must-win. As I said, after the international break, the run of fixtures we have are extremely difficult. And if Watford want to challenge for promotion, we need to be beating a lot of the teams coming up against us in the next few weeks. So, yeah, excited, nervous, scared. I've got all the emotions at the moment. But, yeah, as I say, Watford is never a boring club to support, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you again for my Oxford post-match reaction. Bye-bye.